Welcome to Covington, Kentucky. Across the Ohio River, opposite of Cincinnati, and linked by the iconic Roebling Suspension Bridge, is the city of Covington, Kentucky, the largest city in northern Kentucky and home to 40,000 people. A city that was once deemed one of the most distressed in the nation by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, most people have never heard of it. But Covington is rapidly making some pretty big steps towards becoming a great city in its own right, and the scope of which is especially impressive for a city its size. Covington rose and subsequently fell alongside Cincinnati, having risen as a trade, commercial, financial, and manufacturing hub in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, being a destination for German Catholic immigrants, and had a bustling downtown with lots of retail options. Its streets were beautiful, with charming buildings resembling especially the Greek Revival and Italianate styles, as well as Second Empire and Queen Anne styles that were common in the Midwest at the time, but scaled down to reflect the less dense, smaller population of the city as compared to Cincinnati and other large cities. Most iconic, perhaps, is the Covington Cathedral Basilica of the Assumption, with its Gothic Revival design that is extremely impressive on the outside, but on the inside just blows you away. But Covington, like so much of the country, had a rough mid-20th century. Firstly, there was the Great Depression that hit Covington particularly hard, unlike a lot of other cities that we've covered on this channel, due to trade and finance being such a crucial part of Covington's economy. And then of course, eventually the 50s and 60s cemented Covington's status as a fallen city, between the loss of the manufacturing sector, as well as good old urban renewal causing its fair share of destruction and hollowing out of the city center as well. Though thankfully, many classical and traditional buildings have survived. But the city did go from 65,000 people down to 40,000 today, which is what the population was in the 1890s. However, things have started to bounce back. The downtown core area is very walkable and has seen a bunch of street improvements in recent years, such as pedestrian curb extensions, and not just in a couple of intersections, but all along this half-mile stretch of Madison Avenue, the main street of downtown, as well as this quarter-mile stretch of 7th Street, completely transforming the pedestrian experience around the area, and allowing for Covington's beautiful built environment to actually shine through. But my favorite part of Covington has to be the western side, which has what I consider the optimal suburban urban design. Beautiful, diverse row houses that are rich in character on narrow, walkable streets with small blocks, with local amenities and/or offices on each corner. Streets such as Pike Street and Main Street are easily accessible by foot to the surrounding blocks of the neighborhood and act as basically high streets as well as neighborhood centers. This sort of urban fabric used to be common all across the country, but is now mostly found in urban neighborhoods of large cities, such as Brooklyn or San Francisco. So to have this in such a small town is pretty incredible. And so it's no shock that the city back in the 80s made some investments to uplift Main Street, or what they now call Mainstrasse, an ode to the town's German roots, which you must say has paid off pretty well. Driving these investments is the flourishing of the financial industry in Covington. For decades, the IRS had a large headquarters located right in the heart of downtown, employing nearly 4,000 people. And while that has since closed, more on that later, Covington is also now home to a large Fidelity Investments campus that employs over 2,000 people. The renaissance of Cincinnati in recent years has also coincided with that of Covington. And while the city was wise with these street improvement investments, it must be said that its other recent developments, while being positively effective in terms of growth and business, are unfortunate on the aesthetic front, and have even come at the cost of historic buildings. For example, these historic yet dilapidated buildings on Pike Street and on Washington Street, rather than be saved and go through an adaptive reuse process, were instead demolished and are now being replaced by the Duveneck Square project, which so far provides 110 apartments as well as ground floor retail, with a second phase planned that includes another 2 of these buildings in the surface parking lot across the street. And yeah, these are pretty horrendous and are especially painful knowing that it was only a decade or so ago that beautiful classical buildings, albeit in bad condition, were demolished to make way for these. It would have been great if those original facades were incorporated into the new buildings, or if they really had to be demolished for the project to actually be beautiful and respect the architectural character that makes Covington great. A project that did a much better job of this is actually over on the western side of town, right next to Main Straße, replacing this empty lot, a surface parking lot, and this one historic building, with 178 apartment units spanning the length of the whole block. On the south side, they actually did a great job to provide continuity to the neighborhood and make fairly authentic facades on street level in a way that you wish more projects did. On the north side, where they actually replaced the historic building, the facade is okay. It's a bit soulless, but at least looks sort of appropriate for where we are, and most importantly, provides some really nice enclosure around George Steinford Park, which essentially acts as a public plaza for this part of town. And then a couple of blocks north from there is this apartment complex, River House, with 192 apartment units. Not the best looking building, especially on the corners here, though the fact that it did replace a mostly surface parking lot does redeem it a little bit, until you find out that it also replaced this. Not sure why this had to go too, but hey, at least the new building is mixed use. But Covington has some more projects coming in its future. The first is the construction of the new City Hall atop of what has been vacant land, but much more significantly than that is the massive Central Riverfront project, a project that will completely redefine the riverfront and downtown core of Covington. The site of the IRS building that once employed thousands of people and its sprawling surface parking was located right on the riverfront on prime land. But this was once the site of beautiful neighborhoods and bustling commercial streets. And while the IRS building was important for the city's economy, at least aesthetically, it was a blemish upon Covington. But the building was closed in 2019 once the center's largely paper-based facilities were made obsolete by the widespread use of online tax returns. Either way, the building was abandoned and suddenly 23 acres of prime real estate just opened up for the city. And Covington is now redeveloping this area in a way that's going to be truly transformative. Rather than a large park or massive Texas donut apartment complexes, Covington is bringing back a classic street grid layout and is lining these newly paved narrow streets with human-scale mixed-use development and public plazas. Absolutely incredible. On the northern end, there's going to be a park with a plaza in what will be known as Russell Square, a land bridge, and an overlook of the Ohio River. But connected to Russell Square will be these completely pedestrianized streets that have street-level retail, condos, offices, an entertainment center, and a hotel. Russell Street, 3rd Street, Washington Street, and Johnson Street will have cars on them, but they'll still be pedestrian-oriented in nature and will be lined with mixed-use, human-scale buildings with no setbacks or surface parking lots. And while it seems the designs will mostly be modernist, which is a setback of this project, what is great is that you're getting a diverse, ever-changing array of facades and designs, reflecting what you'll see in the historic downtown or Main Straße, and really any classically designed street anywhere in the country. Long blocks with a monotone, boring style, even if the building is mixed use, is really quite dull and ruins the charm of so many places. This is the classic problem with so many Texas donut buildings that are being built all over the country. They are just way too out of scale. But Center Riverfront makes a point that this will absolutely not be the case. And honestly, just from this element alone, makes the project one of the most impressive large-scale developments in the country. It may be in the top 5 or higher, without exaggeration. It's that rare to see something like this approached with this much care for the pedestrian experience, and it will be rewarded by the vitality that these streets will create. This is one of those projects that you wish your city could do, but doing so would just be too good to be true. Large abandoned lots that eventually get redeveloped usually become an insular, out-of-scale thing that on its own may have its merits, but doesn't contribute at all to the overall cityscape. However, Center Riverfront is specifically designed to expand Covington's urban core and have it seamlessly fit right into the urban fabric, enhancing the streets immediately adjacent to it. Such as how the new detached homes along 4th Street, which was also significantly narrowed, will actually be facing the historic homes on the south side of the street, ingeniously bringing back the neighborhood feel of this corridor after several decades. This project is really the urbanist dream. And what makes this most shocking of all is that it's happening in Covington, Kentucky of all places. And by that, I mean absolutely no offense at all. My point is just that if a small city of 40,000 people in a state and region of the country that isn't necessarily high in demand or brimming with wealth is able to pull off something as amazing as this project, it leaves you wondering why places like Silicon Valley, Dallas, Atlanta, and Chicago are unable to do the same. And what this project should prove to you all is that there really are no excuses. It is simply a matter of will and ideology that ends up dictating the way cities, property developers, and architectural firms go about in designing these projects. And when it comes to something as important as the built environment, it's something that is worth fighting for to get right. And Covington shows us that even today, that is actually very much possible. And with that, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. And now a shout out to my incredible supporters on Patreon. Sven Weisbrod, Grandpa Allen, Ja Baptista, Ruben Hansen, Cameron Dennis, James Whale, Michael Goldman, Ulysses Arnold, Joseph, Roach, Eric Martz, Fortunate Calf, VJ Mari, Jerome Frolich, and my dad.